Hi BookTube, my name is Juan. I am just one reader, and this is my wrap up for the month of July. July was an okay month. I read a total of 6 books, so in terms of quantity, it's maybe not the best month ever. But I did read some really amazing books. So I'm gonna tell you the 6 books that I read right away so that if you want to just skip right ahead into the section of the video that you're interested in, you can do so. So the first book that I finished was Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. Then I read Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the illustrated edition by Jim Kay. Then I read Lovely Dark Deep, a short story collection by Joyce Carol Oates. Then I read Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. Such Small Hands by Andrés Barba. So that's actually in Spanish. And finally, Signal to Noise by Silvia Moreno Garcia, or as my American friends love to pronounce it, Silvia Moreno Garcia, which I think is just delightful. I had to say it. Was that racist, even though I'm Mexican? I don't know. Anyway, so now that you know the books that I will be talking about in that order, if you want to just skip ahead into the portion of the video, the section of the video that you want to see, you can do so. So I will include no spoilers in here as always, so just feel free to enjoy some of my thoughts. So firstly, I read probably the best book that I have read so far this year, and that is Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. I really loved this. I gave it 5 stars right away. I really enjoyed discussing this was such a luxury of a book, such a treasure, and I really enjoyed discussing it with the lovely Sarah from Hardcover Hearts. We have formed a great bond, a great relationship in terms of, like reading buddies and exchanging ideas, and this was not the exception. This was actually a book that I read because of her, because she was going to go to visit Oxford this July, but sadly, of course, because of Corona, she could not. And so she wanted to read some books set in Oxford, and this was one of those. And I had this on my TBR, and I joined her. So we read this, and we really loved it. I adored this book. The more I think about it, the more I think I will be coming back to it eventually, because it's just a book that has it all. It essentially follows a protagonist who is a young man. He is going to Oxford to study in college, and there he meets a family, the Brideshead family, who live in this mansion. It's sort of Downton Abbey kind of setting. The characters are quirky but tragic and sad and incredibly complex. And that's how I would describe this book overall. It's a very complex, intricate, but at the same time incredibly enjoyable piece of literature. I thought it was just fascinating. It's an incredibly fast-paced book. I read this very shortly, very quickly, and it was like a feast in literary form for me. I really loved this. There's many things that Sarah and I discussed over this book. I really loved delving into the psychological issues that are here. Sarah talked a lot about some social, more interpretations of this book, and I think this book just offers a lot of different avenues into it. So I think this is a perfect book to read if you don't typically go for classics. This is a modern classic. It was written in 1944, 1945. So this was written right at the end of the war, and it's just absolutely wonderful. The writing is absolutely dazzling. Like it's the perfect kind of writing style. It's exquisite but precise. The characters are tragic and complex, relatable, and also not. And also, I should mention, and I should really emphasize this book is hilarious. It was so funny and lighthearted, but then it really packs a punch at the same time. Can you see that I love this book? Can you tell? Is it obvious yet? I freaking loved this book. So that is my favorite book of the year, alongside Patrick DeWitt's novel French Exit, which I think are actually two books that are similar in certain regards. You could establish certain bridges, certain connections between them. So yeah, this book was exquisite. Then I read Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, of course, by J.K. Rowling, but really I read this book because it's a new edition, the illustrated edition by Jim Kay. These are coming out periodically, like every couple of years or so. And I have to say that the previous one, Prisoner of Azkaban, left me just a little bit cold. And this one I think was much better in terms of the packaging, the illustrations. I really, really liked certain depictions, certain ways in which Jim Kay reinterpreted the world that we have already seen so much in movies and video games and so many other formats. I really like his interpretation of Hogwarts, even though there was not enough Hogwarts illustrations in this book for me. And what essentially I'm kind of mixed regarding the illustrations in this book. I feel like there are some really great ones and then some very generic ones. So let me just show you a quick example. I'm pretty sure if I just flip through it, I can find a great example. So, okay. So this one is an example of a really good one, in my opinion. This is an illustration of the Barrow, which is the Weasley household. And here we can see, of course, Molly Weasley and, you know, the kitchen. And this is like, you know, such a wonderful, iconic part of the Harry Potter universe and world building for me. And I really liked the attention to detail. I really liked the Quidditch World Cup, for example. This is probably my favorite illustration in the book, because it just really shows you, you know, the vivid depiction, the vivid way in which, vibrant way in which Jim Kay imagined this. Which, if you compare it to the movie, which is the worst movie in the franchise for me, it's very different. Like in the movie, it's so drab and melancholy, and I felt like the director of that movie just didn't get the book at all, and he just didn't. I think his name is Mike Newell. I think that Mike Newell and, you know, the production designer for in that part, but really in the entire movie, just didn't really get it, or maybe they just went in another direction completely and deliberately. But anyway, we're not talking about the movie, thank God. We're talking about this wonderful, vibrant, colorful, warm illustration. But then there are some of them that I don't want to show you because I feel like, well, no, okay, I will show you. For example, I hated this illustration, this kind of illustration, which is a kind of illustration that I really hated because it is absolutely taken from the movie. And that's not why I am buying these pretty expensive illustrated editions. I'm actually buying them and relishing reading them because of the originality, because of the difference. You know, the illustration about the dragon, the first task, I just didn't like that. I thought it was very generic and very much following the footsteps of what we already saw in the movie. So I also didn't like the illustrations of Voldemort, which is a big deal breaker for me, because Voldemort is... So the scene where Voldemort comes back at the end, spoiler, I guess, that scene, I remember when I was a child and I read that scene, that would scare the bejesus out of me. Like I would want to die from terror, from sheer horror. And here it looked like a superhero or like a supervillain, I guess. So I just didn't like it. I thought it was badly done, that part. But all in all, I really enjoyed reading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Jim Kay's take on it. Next up, I read Lovely Dark Deep, which is a short story collection by Joyce Carol Oates. It is my first ever Joyce Carol Oates, and this took me quite a longer time to read than the rest of the books here because it is a short story collection. And with a short story collection, you don't want to read them, you don't want to binge them, you want to really space them out and enjoy one and then think about it and then come back to the collection. So that's the way that I usually approach short story collections, and that's the way that I did it with this one. And I was really very pleasantly surprised. For some reason, probably because of the cover and the title, you can see there's like some hands like picking flowers or something. I don't know. I don't really see the connection between the front cover illustration and the book, but whatever. So for some reason, because of that, because of the cover and the title, I had the idea that the stories would be kind of melancholy and boring and sort of focused more on feminine issues, which, I like to read, but I was just not in that kind of mood. But I still went on and read it. And from the very opening, the very first story, I was so shocked how good this was. Essentially, I think the cover is completely wrong. The title I can get, but I think that this book has not been marketed really well because I think this cover alone will detract a lot of readers out there. Which, you should never judge whether you're reading a book or not based on the cover and gender things associated with that cover. But the truth is that people do. And if that happened to me, I'm pretty sure that it's happened to many people as well. But anyway, I picked this book up and I was in awe of the writing, which is precise and clean and very minimalistic in many regards, but it's incredibly specific. It's incredibly well crafted. We have around 12 to 13 stories here, I believe, and they are all really good. Some of them I enjoyed more than others because it's just the way that short story collections work normally. But most of them were very, very surprising. Joyce Carol Oates has a way of depicting characters and their inner psychological turmoil that is just unparalleled for me. I mean, I very rarely have come across an author that makes me feel this way, that I am inhabiting a character's mind so closely and so accurately. So I really enjoyed this. Essentially, the stories in this collection revolve around gender, identity, class, social issues. It deals a lot with this kind of emotional turbulence that characters are dealing with for various reasons. And it's just the writing. It's about the writing. The writing is really, really good. So I think I gave this 4 stars. By the way, I don't know if I have mentioned the ratings for the previous book. So let me backtrack slightly. No, I think I did mention that Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh received 5 stars from me, obviously. This one, I think I gave between a 3 and a 4. It's really irrelevant because, this book is a landmark. Landmark, no, that's not the right word. English is hard right now. It's such an important book, you just can't put a prize on it. Anyway, whatever. Lovely Dark Deep, I gave 4 stars to. And then we come to the big one. So this is probably the reason why I didn't read that many books this month in July. Gone with the Wind. Okay, where to start with this book? This was really great. This is, of course, the iconic epic about Scarlett O'Hara. That's really what it comes down to. It's about her. It's also about the Civil War in the US, and it's about so many different social topics. This was great. I really feel like I should probably make a separate book review. I have never watched the movie of this, so I am going to watch that this Saturday. So hopefully, sometime next week, I will be posting a review touching on the book, but also the movie and comparing both of them. But anyway, Gone with the Wind. This was really great. I gave it. Okay, so I probably shouldn't start by telling you my rating because my rating probably makes it feel like I didn't love it, and I did. This is Gone with the Wind. I really loved it. So essentially, Gone with the Wind follows the story of Scarlett O'Hara, who is at the beginning of the novel, which is a sprawling epic narrative. Um, at the start of the novel, Scarlett is, I think, 16, more or less, I think, and she lives in the south of the United States of America, and she is a privileged white young teenage girl. And the book really is about her way of processing trauma, the different kinds of trauma that she goes through in the book. But of course, the big trauma, the big theme or the big event of the book is the Civil War and the fact that this is the South, so they lose. And we follow her. We follow her in that losing side of the war. And this book is, as I said, great. I love it because it is a very conventional narrative in that it's very linear. It's very much, I mean, the storytelling in this book is absolutely wonderful because you really get the feeling that Margaret Mitchell is just spinning a yarn and telling you a tale, and you are just in it. You know, it's just like you're there for the ride, and it's really fun to read. It's also incredibly harrowing and heart-wrenching and dramatic and so many emotions in this book. I can't wait to see the movie. I don't know who plays the characters in the movie, and I am dying because I need to put some faces to these characters. But I really, really loved the characters. Okay, so again, if you're looking for a somewhat coherent and understandable, comprehensive synopsis of the book, maybe you should just look it up somewhere else. You're not gonna get it from me because I just said what I can say. It's about Scarlet, it's about the Civil War. I should also say that it's about social issues, especially class and race. There are slaves in this book, black people who are enslaved. We deal with racism, both in white people and in black people, introjected racism. We deal with gender. This is a 960-page long novel. You find everything in it, and that's great. It's one of those books that I think I will eventually come back to because how could I not? It's such a, again, such a like important, wonderful read, and it's so fun to read. It's so readable and enjoyable, even though you want to kill yourself at times. I really found that Scarlett was such a truthful character. Some people say that, oh, she's so annoying. Oh, she's a spoiled brat. No, I don't think those readers got it right. I think, and this is just my opinion, so I'm speaking for myself, I found Scarlett to be absolutely relatable. And trust me, I am not a 16-year-old a privileged white girl from the South in the 1800s. I am not. I am a Mexican man. I don't know if I would call myself white. I suppose I would. I don't know. It's not the point here. I am not like Scarlett, but I am like Scarlett, and I'm guessing you are as well. Disregarding your race, your anything, because Scarlett, even though her character and this novel are very much about race and gender and all of those issues I just mentioned, really what this book is about at its core is the emotional transformation and processing of life experiences that in her case, in Scarlett's case, are completely devastating. And even though she is privileged and white and wealthy, at least at the beginning of the book, it's about that. It's about emotional turbulence and turmoil and hurt and pain, and how someone deals with that. And you might find this book problematic. It is problematic, especially now, reading this book, which is so old, picking it up now, it is problematic and it will stir up things in you. That's sort of a blessing, really. But I think the point is, again, I feel like I'm rambling on, but just to make it short, I would say that this book is not about, it's not only about those things, it's about her emotional experience. This is about Scarlett, and you really feel like you get to understand the deepest depths of a person, of a character. And for that, I really loved this book, and for many other things. This is such a wonderful book with many layers and many different avenues into it. It's very fun. I already said that. I am repeating myself. I should also say that growing up as a Mexican kid myself and being from Mexico, living in Mexico, I really appreciated how melodramatic this book was, because it made me think back. It made me think of telenovelas, soap operas that I used to watch when I was a child. And this book is such a melodrama, such a soap opera. It's a wonderful, well-crafted, elegantly written soap opera, but it is a soap opera with a lot of what we would now consider YA fiction, especially YA tropes. Oh, this is full of that, but it's so wonderful. Anyway, if you want to hear even more about Gone with the Wind from me, you can wait for my individual review. But I did forget to tell you about my rating. So my rating, I gave this book 4 stars, 4.5. So it's a four and a half star book for me, which is a rating that I feel might eventually change over time, because I need to let things sink in and let them simmer for a bit. But I did feel that they're wonderful as this book was, and it was truly wonderful. There are some issues that I found in the writing. I thought essentially that the book was a bit too long. I actually felt that some things could have been just tighter and more neatly done. I did find some sections quite dissimilar to the other parts of the book, so there was like a weird pacing issue that I had in certain moments. I also thought that it got a little bit repetitive, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I felt it was a little bit rambly, which is curious that I should say that, because now I am rambling on. Anyway, moving on. So after having read something as long and complex and profound and epic as Gone with the Wind, I wanted to pick up 2 books that are very short, and I'm glad that I did, because they were very good palate cleansers, even though one of them was absolutely terrible. But anyway, I will get to that in a second. So firstly, I read Such Small Hands. This is a Spanish novella. So I read the actual Spanish original edition. So this is Las Manos Pequeñas by Andrés Barba. And this is a very slim little thing of a novella. And we follow a girl called Marina, and she loses both of her parents in a horrible traffic accident. And we follow her as she goes to a psychologist, and then she goes to an orphanage, and we see what happens there. And I liked this book. I think this is one of those books that you have to really let sink in. Like you really have to let them like drift in your mind and see what happens afterwards, because I feel like while I was reading it, the book didn't make that big an impression on me. I was enjoying it. It's a very short thing, so I read it in one sitting. It is creepy, it's strange, it's bizarre. The writing is mostly good, even though there were some parts, some sections of the novella, and again, this is very short, but there were some sections in it that where I found the writing not so tight. I thought there was an overuse of similes that really I think it was just too many of them. But overall, I would say this was successful. There's a weird sort of element in this book. There's like a Greek chorus kind of element, where the girls in the orphanage speak in plural, in the plural person, in a sort of Greek chorus, choral kind of way. And I thought it was okay. The writer, he also shifts from one perspective to another, and so we get to see the story from different like points of view. And this is all done in a pretty short amount of pages, so that's something nice to say about it. I did find that it was lacking in general of a surprise factor, or I just found that the violence and the weirdness of everything that's happening here was a little subdued, which again could be a positive, but I just wish we could have seen or felt more of it, because I just thought it was a little bit subdued and sort of suggested. And I like that because the ending is very open. It's a very open-ended kind of book. And you can sort of imagine many things around the narrative in the book. So that's good. But I don't know, I just felt like there was something lacking in the book. So I gave it 3 stars. I don't think it deserves more, honestly. But I do know that a lot of readers are absolutely crazy for this book. Don't know why. I guess it's just a matter of personal taste. But there you go. And then finally, Signal to Noise by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Or, again, I just have to go and say it again, Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is just so much fun speaking like that. I feel like such a cheat. So I decided to read this book because everyone that I know who has read it has loved it. And really, I mean, just really good praise for this book. People are always talking about how wonderful and inventive and enjoyable and fast-paced and fascinating it is. What they don't tell you is that it is absolute trash. This book was absolutely horrible. It was appalling. It was laughably bad. I actually did laugh quite a bit reading this book, just like rolling my eyes, I don't even have the proper language right now to express what I felt reading this book. So, okay, let me tell you what this is about. Signal to Noise is a YA novel, which is something that I didn't know. I didn't know this was going to be YA. Very basic YA, but it is. Nothing wrong with that. It's just what it is. I didn't know that, and that's probably a big factor in why I really disliked it. I thought this was going to be like a cute fantasy romp with a lot of heart. That's what I have been promised, and I was robbed. I was robbed. This was YA basic fiction. Essentially, we follow this character, Mercedes Meche, and we follow her in two separate timelines. One timeline is when she is a teenager, like in high school or something, or maybe junior high. And then the other one is when she's older, many years have gone by, she's coming back to Mexico. By the way, I didn't mention, this is set in Mexico City, which used to be called Distrito Federal, or Federal District. Now it's called just Mexico City, Ciudad de Mexico. Anyway, this is set here in my hometown. This is where I live. This is where I have lived all my life. So I also was very interested in seeing how this book depicted Mexican culture and Mexican identity and Mexican things. And it was laughable because essentially it does represent Mexican culture quite a bit. You can see that for Silvia Moreno Garcia, it is really important that the reader get it, that this is about Mexico. Like, there are references to Mexican things in every page or every other page. It's ridiculous. Like, there's no need for that amount of references. Like, every single thing has a reference to Mexico. Like, yeah, the representation was overwhelming, and I started to feel very annoyed by that very quickly. And yet, at the same time, I thought that even though there were so many references to Mexico and Mexican things, the representation felt so bad for me. It felt very inauthentic. It just felt bad. It felt like Mexican culture light for an American audience. And, you know, just like very simple things like the names of the characters. This book is filled with characters who have names that are taken out of soap operas, telenovelas. I mean, like Romualdo. What the fuck? I don't know anybody who has that ridiculous name. Constantino. What? Pretty much like 90% of the names in this book. Vicente Vega. Meche. I mean, Meche is a little bit more common, but not anymore. Just so many names here. It's just laughable. Principal Estrada. It just feels American. It feels sort of racist. It feels, and I know that Silvia Moreno Garcia is trying her best. I really, really enjoy. I really commend her for her intentions of representation and everything. Okay, there's a character like the bully at the school. His name is Teofilo. What the fuck? I mean, that name is it's so bad. So it's just like ridiculous, preposterous, Mexican culture light for American audiences. To me, a Mexican reader, a Mexican person living in the 21st century, it felt so inappropriate and so laughably bad and wrong. But so, okay, that's the representation. Now, what else was horrible about this book? The characters are incredibly one-dimensional, just completely tropey stereotypes, walking stereotypes. They are cardboard cutouts and nothing more. Some of them are quirky. You know, it's like when you're reading a John Green book and you have all of these kinds of stereotypes walking around, like Augustus Waters, or you have, you know, the quirky boy who says eccentric things. But I don't mind that in John Green, because John Green, even though he plays a lot with YA tropes, basic tropes, I have always found substance in his books. And this is just such a nothing kind of book. It's really trashy. It's about nothing. I mean, I guess if you had to describe some sort of plot, I would have to say that this is about this character, Meche, who we follow in two different points in her life. once when she was a teenager, and then when she's coming back to Mexico City after tragedy happens in her family, and so she has to come back and she has to face her demons because this is not tropey at all, and she has to reconnect and face old friends and enemies, and then on top of that, which is very bad, there is a magical element, but the magical element is so underwhelming and so unexplained, and it's really, it's not even really there. Like, the book is not about that. I think the book is marketed as a fantasy novel, but really there's only like very few scenes of the actual magic, and it's literally the worst kind of magic, the most bland kind of magic that you can think of. It's literally almost non-existent. So that didn't work out for me either. The writing is not exactly bad, but it's just YA basic writing, very short sentences. It is very readable, I will say that. It is an incredibly readable book. It flies by because there's nothing in it, so there's just a lot of dialogue and then tropey scenes that you have already seen in many movies or in soap operas, telenovelas, or TV shows. You have seen this already. There's nothing new here except for the magical element, which is not really an element. So yeah, this was just pretty trashy in my opinion, and I know that a lot of people love it. Maybe I would have loved it or enjoyed it more than I did if I had read it many years ago, but it's just the way that I am approaching it now. So yeah, this I gave it 1 star, of course, because I couldn't give it less. And I probably wouldn't have given it 0 stars just because at least it was fun to see some parts of Mexican culture represented in some way, I guess. And it was funny. I mean, I laughed quite a bit because it was ridiculous. It was such a ridiculous novel. Oh my God, like, it was so contrived and just preposterous. And the characters' names, they're just absolutely wonderful. Like, and there are, by the way, there's also a music element because of course it's a YA novel, so we need to have music element, and the music element is so overplayed. Like, we get it. The protagonist Meche is a junkie of music, and she loves, listening to records and LP albums, and we get so many references of music, and between those references and the Mexican trashy, horribly rendered references, it just becomes a reference book, a book filled with references that are not even used well and that make the book feels so contrived instead of really going for the story and delivering something interesting. So don't bother with this book. Those are all the books that I read in July. Thank you very much if you have stayed here until the very end of this video. This was an unusually ranty, rambly, and frankly angry video, especially with that book, Signal to Noise. This was just the worst. But thank you very much for watching. Indeed, leave your comments down below. Let me know what you read in July, what you have enjoyed this month. I want to hear all about it. I am looking always for more recommendations. Thanks for watching. I will see you on the next video.